Senator Ron Wyden joins us. It is a pleasure.
Thank you.
Let's not get too far into the past at this point. There's a long road ahead still for health reform. Where do you go from here, and where do others who share your point of view? I want to make the point that you're not the only person by far in Washington, D.C. who wants to see choice for everybody in America.
Dylan, this is far from over. There are going to be a lot of other opportunities. We're going to spend the next few days, for example, trying to work with the Senate Finance Committee in order to make some progress before Tuesday. But then Senator Harry Reid is going to take the finance bill and the other bill and try to merge them for the floor. Then we'll have amendments on the floor. Look, the fact of the matter is the American people, hardworking Americans, do not want to be forced to buy unaffordable insurance coverage from monopolies. They're going to want choice. They want to turn the tables on the insurance lobby. There are more of us than there are of them. And through programs like this, if we can get the word out about what choice is going to mean to make health care coverage more affordable, we can win this.
What do people have to understand about the choice proposals so that when they hear, this will put the employers on the hook for all the sick because the healthy people will leave the employer-based health care plans and they'll all go join cheaper plans on the exchanges if we allow what you're talking about? There are lists of concerns.
The Congressional Budget Office, when they analyzed our proposal, found that you wouldn't have that kind of doomsday scenario. We also have something called risk adjustments.
So what does that mean?
What it really means is if you were to have happen what CBO said wouldn't happen and some of the young people would leave, at the end of the year the insurance exchange could make a payment to employers to adjust if, say, the young people left. But the bottom line is we're pushing for what members of Congress have. In effect, you'll be able to keep the coverage you have. I feel very strongly about that. The president also believes in that. But we also want to say if your insurance company is abusing you, if they're exploiting you, if, for example, they're denying a claim that you know ought to be covered, you ought to have other choices. Members of Congress do. The way this bill is written, you wouldn't have choices like members of Congress. You wouldn't have one choice.
Well, Senator, one of the things that Senator Baucus said was that this has no support. But today, when you read in the New York Times, David Brooks, conservative columnist for the New York Times, loves your plan. Does David Brooks give you really the assist you need to keep the Wyden Amendment alive?
I think the American people support this idea. Every time there's a rally, the President of the United States looks out at the crowd, and the President says, you should get the same deal that members of Congress get. And it is the biggest applause line at every single rally. What I'm saying is that members of Congress, and by the way, these are federal employees, Joe the janitor at the Federal Bureau of Engraving gets the same set of choices. They ought to be in a position to turn the tables on the insurance lobby, put the consumer in the driver's seat, and I'll go with the American people. There are a lot more of them than there are insurance lobbyists.
So procedurally, if you look at this, whether it's the insurance lobbyists, labor union, the American Benefits Council, Mr. Klein, who joined us a little while back, who was very aggressive in his desire to make sure that no one gets choice and all the rest of this, where do you go from here when you consider obviously the special interests are so formidable that they were able to influence Democrats on the Baucus committee to go along effectively with a no vote, a mechanism so powerful, a lobbying mechanism so powerful that it protected politicians from being forced to vote in public against letting people choose their own health care. How do you fight that?
Dylan, you described what I call the status quo caucus. They're led by the insurers, and of course this is about who controls the money. I think when the American people see what happens in terms of lost pay when there are insurance ripoffs and they don't get the money for their salary, I think we're going to win this. But it's a question of taking on some of the most powerful interests in our country. Of course, we're disappointed in what happened in the last round in the Finance Committee, but we're just going to go on from there. We're going to be positive. We're going to make sure that folks understand when their president says at every single rally in America, you should have the choices like members of Congress, that maybe the Congress, if they listen to the lobbyists, isn't going to give them any choice at all. We're going to put them in the driver's seat.
If you look at David Brooks' piece, and I recommend anybody who hasn't had the opportunity yet today, read it. It's a very thorough and intelligent analysis of why free markets, competition, and choice driven by the consumer actually reduces prices and makes for a better economy. How has the reception from the White House been to your efforts to create choice for Americans in health insurance?
I've met with the president a number of times. He has always indicated that he agrees with, he calls it 90% of our thinking. And what I'm trying to make the case to the president about is there is a sweet spot in between blowing up the employer-based system, which nobody is trying to do, and saying people shouldn't get more choices at all. I think we found that sweet spot. We are saying we respect the right of people to keep what they have. In effect, if you want to keep your employer coverage, you're just going to check a box, you're going to stay put. But you also ought to have more choices. And I think far-sighted employers and insurers will recognize that our approach will strengthen their hand with their insurer. They'll be able to say, those employers and those labor folks, they'll be able to say, hey, look, if you give us a better deal, we'll stay with you. If not, our workers are going to demand that they go to the market.
Is there anything that you could add to the legislation or any way that you could accommodate some of the concerns that unions have about lost membership because of the availability of choice for everybody and those benefits, those types of concerns?
We have offered a whole host of accommodations. We've tried to be respectful, for example, of collective bargaining agreements. We want to put labor folks in a position where they can use the marketplace when it's to their advantage. There are a host of ways in which employers and labor unions can get more choices, benefit just like their workers. We're interested in reaching out to them to get this done.
All right, Senator, a real pleasure. Thank you for making
the trip out, too.
Yeah,
thank you both
so much.